Well, essentially, yeah, it does, doesn't it? uh, it makes you want to study medieval history, even more than you may already be studying it. What is the background for us, me, and associates of Imagine Image Multimedia? They don't work for me. They're just friends. But I say that they're associates because they all contribute, right, to this effort. They all have something to say and ideas to provide, and so they are associates of what I'm doing, and I am an associate of what they're doing. Uh, While doing all this, uh, it reinforces the fascination with the period of the Middle Ages. And I'm not entirely sure how to tell you what that time period is. Um, the only way that I can say it in wargaming terms is it's after the Ancients era, right? So after it's after the 900s or 800s. So it's the beginning of the Viking Age, in my view. I mean, you could say early Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, okay. So it encompasses the period after the Vikings show up. And what are the Vikings anyway? What do they do? Where'd they come from? That's a good point, right? Well, it's kind of easy to answer. The Vikings are essentially the societies that existed during Roman times evolved. Okay, so from 800, 900, all the way up to 1300, maybe 14, is the Middle Ages. After 1400, you start to get into the gunpowder era, and you get to the so-called late Middle Ages of the 1500s, and the introduction of mass pike formations. So it's different. What was it during the Hundred Years' War? You didn't have mass pike formations, right? I don't, if I remember it correctly, it didn't happen that way. And so the Flemish pikemen, right? The Swiss pike. Then from that point on, from the 1500s, you get the Spanish tercio. Then you get into the 30 Years' War, pike and shot era. And the reason that that exists is because somebody invented a way of igniting a powder charge in a barrel and firing a lead projectile, okay, a bullet. And hence, and I don't know if you've ever seen those types of weapons, uh, the so-called muskets have no bearing at all, no relevance at all to what we know today as a musket. Those things, when you go to the Renaissance fairs, you'll see them if they have them. They're ginormous. They're tree trunks with a metal barrel stuck on them, and then a wick of burning rope uh, touched. In some cases, in the early versions, literally, you're holding the tube and you're touching a burning wick to the pot of the powder charge, and then boom. So that's the thing. So Middle Ages is everything except that. I mean, before that. All right, just to put it, you know, 60,000 foot view. Um, why did we? Why? It's always the why, isn't it? Why? 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 Why'd you do it? How'd that happen? Well, I can say that after uh, the family moved to Canada in 1969, everything changed education wise for the better. When we moved to Toronto, everything became English and European as opposed to what we had before, which was Minnesota. Now, that's nothing wrong with that, but Minnesota is like Wisconsin and Michigan and Illinois and Iowa. It's Midwest. But when we went to Toronto, I can say that it is the equivalent of New York City in Canada. Of course, everybody says that, and it's true. But a European New York City is what it is. And it's probably, in my view, in my opinion, the best city on planet Earth. And I haven't been back for several years, but let's hope that's still the case. I'm pretty sure it is. Uh, so we got into all these books and all this stuff from England. Never saw it before. In the library in Mississauga, I used to spend hours there. And it was like, for me, it was like Crocs and Brentano, or it was like when we moved to the States, Barnes and Noble. Remember that? We just spend my wife and I, my girl at the time girlfriend, we would spend hours. That was our date, going to the bookstore, Barnes and Noble, and it's such a shame as what has happened to it now. Such a shame, and same with Borders. It was a pivotal moment in my history, her history, and the history of us, and our level of education and knowledge and wisdom. Was the existence of those bookstores. And you cannot absolutely get that when you do something online. It does not happen. I wish there was a way to bring back the massive bookstore. Now, when we go to London, Foyle's bookstore is the place to go. And ergo, when we go to London next, you will find me there. In the history section, of course. Uh, by the way, what you're looking at is not DroidCam. This is OBS cam, which is interesting because I didn't have to change anything. It just immediately took the place of the current bottom right-hand corner view. All right, so how did we get started? Well, one of the things that was inspirational for us was a book from Usborne, right? Again, British publications company, called Knights at War. Knights at War, and then actually to back up, what came first? Excalibur, the game, the board game came first. And then Knights at War. You know what though? They were probably pretty close to the same time period. Mid 80s. I'm sorry. Probably 87, 88. I mean, I moved here in 88. I moved to Illinois in 88, so it was pretty close to 1988. Because as soon as I moved here, I met Charlie Prosick, ex-Marine from whose experience touched on Iwo Jima. Good friend for many years. Excellent hobby store. One of the last remaining good hobby stores you will ever find. And of course, now it's gone. But at the time, it was our go-to place for everything models. Every conceivable type of model, regardless of origin or age, was in Charlie Prosick's hobby store. It's like he came out of Iwo, came back to the United States and said, I'm going to open a hobby store. That's it. And he did it for all his life. Knights at War was a book, colorful, beautiful, knowledgeable. Again, Usborne. And of Usborne, Peter Usborne and his group produced several books, including Galactic War, naval combat stuff. All those books were helpful in inspiring me and countless others. And of course, what we're looking at here is the board game Excalibur. And as you can see, we've got the colored discs now. We didn't have them before. We had clear discs, and we were putting a self-adhesive dot. And I was like, you know, that just looks kludgy, and it just kind of looks amateurish, and we're better than that. So we're going to go ahead and spend the money and get the colored discs. The unfortunate thing about the colored discs, even though they're opaque, is that there's an issue with the red and the purple and off kind of a purple. They're so close. I live on the purple. There's a red disc and there's another like light purple. It's so close to the red you can hardly tell them apart. That's the only downside, is the red color. But when you look at them in your hand, you can see the difference in the color and you can weed out the ones that you don't want. So we purchased these on Amazon, of course. Colored discs that are now the bases for all the miniatures. As you can see, there's a red, a green, and a blue force. And what you're looking at is essentially, I think they're all the same except for, no, they're all the same. So there's a Knight 5, his value is a 5. There is a Man at Arms, value 3, and an Archer, value 2 in melee. Otherwise, the Archer has a ranged effect. Um, and the die that's on there, the D12 that's on there, is just a thrown on there. It's not representative yet of the value of all those figures. That's the idea for the D12 and the idea for these neat little movement trays. 3 figures on a movement tray with the D12 giving the total value of those figures. And this deviates a lot from the Excalibur board game. And there's a lot of things that deviate from the original board game. Because when we miniaturized this, when we implemented miniatures in the Excalibur board game, which is, again, remember, a 5x5 foot, printed on cloth, beautiful map. When we did that, certain things had to change. And we've implemented some new ideas. And in closing, I'll let you know what those are. We have a tower, a watchtower we've implemented, a princess who needs to be rescued. Yes, I thought that would be a cute idea. And a thief that can roam the countryside stealing money from the manors. And wolves. Remember, you probably don't, but it would be great if you did. The old video game called Lords of the Realm. A wonderful, hokey, but accurate, and I mean on screen, nice graphical interface. A video game for 6 players that we stayed up till 5 in the morning. We played for 10 hours. And it was an online thing. You could play with people online. But we played each other and we played other people. Sometimes it would be 10 hours. 3 pots of coffee, in other words. Yeah. In those days, we didn't have the Keurig machine. It was just pots of coffee. And there was 3 of them all night. One of the most excellent games ever. And then, of course, came Medieval Total War, which set the bar so high no one's ever been able to accomplish the same thing as the guys at Creative Assembly did when they created Knights at War. I'm sorry, Medieval Total War. All the offshoots from Medieval Total War as engine, in my view, are not as good. It's like Battlefield 1942. All the things that came after Battlefield 1942 were actually not as good. I don't know why, but that's the truth. These are the classic things. These are the things that that put us where we are today. Our frame of mind, our desires, what we want to see in games. Those are all the contributing factors. And now, as we have, I don't want to say it, but somehow I want to get it across that we've accomplished some 3D printing miracles. As my other video talked about, why is this happening? Right? I feel like Rachel Maddow or Chris Hayes. Why is this happening? All of a sudden, prints are failing. Well, I kind of figured out why. And long story short, you just got to go through the troubleshooting and you got to find out what the problem is. I still believe there might be a mechanical issue with either the rollers. I think the belts are okay, but the rollers on my Ender 3 were the issue. I'm not sure. But there was a height issue. Whenever a print got to about 5, 8, 9, say when it got to 10 millimeters above 0, it started to act like there was something weird. And that sounds to me like there's a point in the stepper motor where it could be bad. I don't know. But it's no longer the case. So anyway, thanks as usual for bearing with me and watching this stuff happen. Um, it really makes me just not want to live here. It does. Not that I mean, I expect to go back to England and see, people walking around in the Middle Ages, but the fact of the matter is it would make me feel so much better than living in cornfields, right? Even though it's obviously we're not going to be able to do anything like serious, like moving or anything. But the fact of the matter is that living in England, living in that environment would just be the ultimate. Countryside. I'm talking countryside. Um, yeah, London's fine. Big cities are fine. But countryside that looks like this, beautiful, uh, yeah, just like everything you've seen so far is there. Anyway, again, Foyle's Bookstore in Charing Cross. I will be there on days when we are traveling to England. Uh, you can stop and say hello. Don't ask for autographs. So just say hello and chat, and bring me a coffee or something. All right. So until next time, there's where we're at. I just wanted to actually just show you the discs and the figures and the fact that we've got some new 3D print. You want to see the tower? Here's the tower. If I can throw it in front of the camera, the phone camera. Here's the tower. Isn't that cute? Can you see it? Yeah. Right? Oh, I might as well show you the rest. Here's the assassin guy. Well, he's actually a robber. Right? The printing is actually not too bad. Now, mind you, this isn't 0.16 layer height. All right. I didn't want to take too much time printing these guys, but that's again Thingiverse. That's a nice little figure. Okay, and then let me show you the princess. Her crown obviously didn't come out because the designer didn't design it to be this small. But there she is. Oh, hello, hello, my subjects. So yeah, she's an objective. She's going to be somewhere, and you have to go get her and bring her back, or she's been kidnapped or something of that nature. Anyway, it's interesting. I don't have the wolves because I could not print them. That is an issue when you have an animal. You got to put supports, and I don't want to print with supports. Bear that in mind too. Supports equal bad. Always, when you print stuff, avoid having to print with supports. Why? Because when you go to remove the support, sometimes it breaks the model. That's the problem with things that are this small. Now, supports are okay when you're dealing with 28 millimeter and larger, but with 172, 22 millimeter, you're talking about arms and legs that are very thin. Now, they shouldn't be. Designers, people who draw these images, should be drawing them to compensate. Don't draw them accurately. We don't care about accuracy. At that small stage, you want something that's going to work first. Look proper second, if not third. So when you remove the supports, sometimes you break an arm, a leg, a head. So whenever you design something, please avoid the supports. Now an animal like this, walking like this, you're going to have, especially if it has its head up, that's got to have a support. What I'm talking about filament printing, not resin. But it's resin as well. Or you got to print it upside down. So something of that. You get the idea. All right, so we are printing our forests back to where we were before the errors crept in. We do have them on trunks. We've reinforced the diameter of the trunks, and put that little bush up in the air, 5 millimeters or such, maybe 8 millimeters or such. So it casts a shadow, right? As you can see it right now, there's a shadow being cast on the floor of the forest. And what does that do? It gives it extra realism, which is why, we're doing it. Because we've got time before Little Wars, so I hope to get all of this printed and then painted. Because I like the fuzzy things, the little pom-poms, but they hide the ground is what they're doing. So, all right. There we are. Thanks. We'll come back with other updates and maybe a couple of fast action turns, or maybe just one or two. We've already had a couple of scenarios we've discussed where we showed the actual mechanics of the game, so maybe we don't need to do that. But I just like sitting here talking with you or monologuing with you and showing what we are working on. So here we are.